why I do this, but years ago my friend gave me a Captain Picard action figure and I was so touched by it, and I just started traveling with him, especially when I go to the States. Like, the States kind of scared me, just border crossings in general. I think we all can agree it's not like the coolest breeze. Mm-hmm. But I would just bring the Picard doll because I just liked it. And he's awesome. But then it also created this amazing icebreaker because it would go through the scanner and they'd all stare at me like, you're a grown-ass woman.
Welcome to This Broken Mixtape, the podcast that rewinds and presses play on the soundtrack to your life. I'm Jeff Wu.
And I'm Justin Lee.
As a professional singer-songwriter, violinist, and DJ, Toronto's Maya Killtron is something of a renaissance woman in music. She's toured all around the world as a featured performer, musician, and DJ, including Winter Music Conference in Miami, the Halifax Jazz Festival, and New York City's CMJ Festival. We sat down with Maya to talk to her about juggling her various musical talents, how her cool dad put her onto the Fugees and TLC, and a shit ton of Star Trek.
This week on the show, we're joined with our special guest, Maya Killtron. Thanks for being on the show, Maya.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, you're kind of a renaissance woman in music. You're a singer-songwriter, violinist, DJ. I was wondering, do you have like a preference for one of those mediums, or?
No, and I think it's really situational because I think I may at times gravitate towards one more than the others, but as I get older, I'm learning to combine them together more. I think when I was younger, I wanted to keep everything very separate, and now it feels as if the main shtick is to bring it all together, and I'm still figuring that out, but I enjoy all of them. Mm-hmm. They all have different appeals.
So, I mean, walk us through sort of your journey with music. You started off playing violin, like classically trained?
Yes. I was your quintessential Suzuki kid. I started when I was really small and went through the ranks, going through books, going through orchestra, and sort of eventually leading me to a regional arts high school where I actually played saxophone because I didn't have a string program. And I don't think I was particularly good. I just could play the violin, so I think they saw as like, oh, this is a unique person to admit into the school. And then balancing that with doing sports, violin just honestly became hard and too hard. And I started singing in a choir there, and I was like, wow, singing is so much easier. Why would I ever play the violin? This is ludicrous. So I started singing, and I eventually switched my major and became a vocal major. And then when I was in my last year of high school, through a vocal teacher, they suggested going to the Banff Center, which is more a post-grad, post-secondary program. But for some reason, my parents were okay with me missing like 2 months of school and missing all my final exams in high school to go take part in the jazz workshop there. So I went, and I was the youngest person and sort of discovered at that point that that's what I probably should do with my life. And then also was able to play violin and sing in the program, and then I decided to go to Humber, and then the rest has been like a bit of a mishmash of a journey, but that's pretty much how it streamlined into making it a career move as opposed to like a hobby.
Okay. And in terms of writing and composing your own songs, did that happen at Humber, or?
It started at Humber, but it really started in earnest after. I was part of this big band, big as in like amount of people in the band, not successful-wise. But it was called King Sunshine, and we toured a lot and did a lot of festivals. So I got my first taste of what it was like to be a front person and write. Though I didn't really understand the business side of things, it was just sort of, when you're 19 and you get to do these things, it's pretty cool. But the writing happened after. I think my frustration was dealing with so many other people's ideas of what they thought something should be. And I was part of other bands at that time too. And then I just started learning to write. And I think it took a long time. It didn't come super naturally, although I thought it did. But listening back to those songs, they were pretty garbage. So now taking more time and learning the craft of songwriting, I think only now it's starting to take shape properly, I think.
And I know, like, sort of, if we're talking about genres, you kind of started a lot in like bluegrass, especially with the violin. How did you eventually decide that? I mean, I guess you kind of like sort of jump and cross genres, but I think your sort of main thing is like sort of electro, dance, pop kind of music.
It started when I was in college. I was definitely kind of hoping to be a jazz singer. And then I think realizing the economics of the music industry, that was just not feasible. And also it wasn't as fun as being a pop singer. You can reach more people with pop music, and what I learned through King Sunshine is you can make people dance. So I think that's what led me to making the music I make now, which is a little bit of a hybrid, but also it's just an amalgam of all the things I like. And it took until now to realize that that's okay. You don't necessarily just have to decide that I'm going to be a jazz singer and jazz is simply this one thing. You can be a jazz trained pop singer that likes Prince, They can work together.
And that's sort of the interesting thing with your career is that I know that you do sort of solo performances, but then you also play with a quintet string quartet. Yeah.
Well, it's a string quartet plus a bass player.
Right.
So yeah, I think I'm fortunate in that I had a really substantial amount of musical education. So it gives you a skill set to do a lot more things. The downside to that is when you do a lot of things, you don't have the focus that some of the other artists you've had in your show, like my good friends like Tanika and Maylee, have had more singular focuses. Foci, is that the plural of focuses?
I think it's foci, no?
No, it's not.
I'm good with foci.
We can invent words.
That's fine. It's 2018.
Focusi? I don't know.
Focusi. Well, I think, had the great benefit of having more of a singular focus, and it streamlined their music, which is why they are where they are, where I definitely want the same thing, but I get to do these other things. Like I still tour with Classic Albums Live as a violinist, and I tour as a DJ too. So it allows for a fun life. Like I just got off tour with this artist named Simmel out of Seattle, and I was hired not to sing at all. In fact, I was encouraged I'd not sing and just to play violin for him. So while it's a great opportunity in some ways to just enjoy life, it does distract from one venture. So I think this past year it's been a lot of fun, but learning again to amalgamate these things into a singular vision. And the string quartet and the solo music are now starting to formulate into one project as opposed to these individual offshoots.
Okay, so I know with the string quartet you do different covers, originals as well, but some of your covers I've seen on YouTube. Annie Lennox, Walking on Broken Glass, which is like a personal favorite of mine. Like Taylor Swift's. It's very like there's a broad range of stuff. Yeah. Like there's hip hop, there's soul music, there's pop music, and it's like it sounds gorgeous with the string section, and it's something that you don't necessarily get to see every day.
I think that's my approach to it, is that I think strings, I have a bias, but I do believe strings are a little bit magical, and it is something that is rare now. We're not accustomed to seeing it. We didn't grow up in a generation where having an artist perform an album with a large-scale orchestra, it was common. Now you just don't hear it. So in that sense, I love creating that tapestry of like a string background, but bringing it to a familiar like a song or something that people can relate to. Nowadays, like we live in a land where covers are the gateway drug to an original artist. That's not necessarily how I would like anything to happen for my own career or anyone else's, but it is also a chance to be indulgent, where I love my own music and I'm really proud of it. And if I had to tour my own record every day for the next year, I would be very happy to do so. but I'd also be happy to sing A Kiss from a Rose every day because it's just it's just a good song. So it's kind of I get to be indulgent.
Well, let's talk about your album. I know that you're set to release your first, your debut album,
Yes.
full length. I know you've had like a couple of EPs.
I've had, a couple of singles and then like quasi EPs that never really got formally released in, I guess, the modern setting, smaller releases. But now, I'm slated to release this full album this year.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that. What can we expect? What's the sound?
Well, again, like some of the other, which in the past could have been more confusing, it isn't a grouping of a lot of my favorite things, but it definitely is streamlined into a lot of 80s influence, Prince, Tina Marie, those sounds with 90s style vocals. So the vocals that you hear on an SWV track, those layers of harmony mixed with a slightly more 80s sound. And I think that aesthetically really appealed to me, but it also means that it can be dancey, it can be joyful now. And this is definitely a generalization, but I feel a lot of music now is a lot of really somber kind of stuff. And I wanted to make something that was joyful. And those two sounds to me epitomize that funness where music can be fun again. It doesn't mean I don't take it super seriously or work really hard to be meticulous about everything I do, but I want people to come to that show or listen to that album and have fun. And maybe it's about a serious subject. A lot of them are like really heartbreaking subjects, but if you juxtapose it with a really happy feeling, you can get a lot of good out of it. For me, that's the approach I've taken to the album.
Okay. And what kind of producers have you been working with?
I've been working with a great producer out of Mississauga. His name is Milos Angelov. And we spent a lot of time just playing music in the club scene in Toronto for years. And he has spent the better part of the last few years really becoming a world-class producer. So it only felt natural to work with him. We also share a lot of the same just loves of our favorites. And I think centering on those two eras, specifically that 80s funk, that post-disco era, and then our sort of swan song favorite 90s artists, putting them together. He's great to work with. With the remixers, a lot of friends in Toronto, again, have made the move from mere players to now adding producers and really crafting their own sound. So I've had the great benefit of working with a lot of people in town. So that's been really nice.
And let's talk a little bit about your DJ career. Tell us, how did you first get into DJing?
It was an accident. A good friend of mine books the DJs for the Toronto Harbor for all the boats. And I think they were just short on someone and they sort of asked me, can you just go in and do this? Like any great professional. Of course I said yes, but I don't know how to do this. And I went, and it was not a disaster, but I don't think it was anything great. But I really loved it. I was like, wow, this is a lot of fun. But coming from a violin background of this OCD level dedication to the craft, I didn't feel right about just being a space bar, I can play a song for you now, and here's another song. I was lucky enough that a lot of DJs took me under their wing and said, this is how you use turntables. This is the difference between, a CDJ and using vinyl. And you have to learn how to mix this way and learn this before you accept this gig. And I moved, in quotation marks, took a long vacation in New York and met up with a bunch of DJs there who eventually became my collaborators. And they really taught me how to DJ. And I had to DJ in New York City and hip hop music to a hip hop crowd. Wow. And it was terrifying. And I was bad. I was horrible. And it took someone standing there scaring the shit out of me every week. We had this party in the Lower East Side that we played on Thursdays called Northern Touch. And
did you come up with a name?
I don't think I came up with the name. I don't know who came up with the name, but we were just yeah. And he was, my friend Tanner, DJ Tanner is Canadian as well. So we're let's just rep this really hard. And he was like, you're an idiot, and I will allow you to have this opening set with me. And he would stand there and be like, yo, that mix was garbage. You want to try that again? And I was like, there's people here. He's like, yeah, I know, they heard it. I was like, oh, okay. And you kind of learn through fire how to be good, because you have no other option but to be good in those situations. So
yeah, fear is a good motivator.
it certainly was.
Yeah.
And after being in that environment for long enough, you sort of realize, okay, I know how to work a crowd. If I just, instead of worrying so much about not being as technically proficient as some of the other DJs, I can offer a skill set too. And as a singer, I know how to command a crowd. As a DJ, I didn't realize that you also have to do the same thing. And then it started to click, and I could work on the technique and work on things, but also be efficient in a club setting and say like, okay, I know how to get these people going. And I think that's where it started to take shape and make sense. Now I feel comfortable within a skill set in that I know what I can do. Am I going to enter the DMCs or Red Bull? Hell no. But do I feel really confident and playing a really good party where I know people are going to dance and I'm going to mix well and choose good songs? Yes. Arguably, someone could say to me like, oh, that bitch can't DJ. But it's like, actually, I can.
Do you ever play any of your own tracks in a set?
Oh, all the time. I'm like the most shameless self-promoter. I'll like Instagram it the second I do, and people are like, yeah.
And then like if somebody comes over and says, who is this? Are you like, it's me, dummy? What do you say to that? Like without being like completely arrogant about it, right?
Oh, I am arrogant about it. Oh, I'm kidding. No, it's actually kind of the nicest thing where rarely people come up to you and ask. Usually I think the age of the DJ is changing, at least from what a lot of my friends are experiencing. What I'm experiencing is people are less about going to see a great DJ. Like people like Premier or Jazzy Jeff, they'll go to see them because of what they do. But the DJ's role is now to play what people want. It's always been that role, but it was also a musical curator that would introduce music to people. And unfortunately now in the club scene, people don't have the patience for that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I really want to play you these like rare B-sides, but I can't. So to answer your question, I think it's the most flattering thing is not when people come up and say anything to you, but more when they don't stop dancing. You can go from something familiar that they already know and like work in your own music, and they don't really shift. It's not like, oh, this isn't Migos. Not that I have any songs that sound like that, but when you can kind of work that transition in and everyone still has a great time, A, you feel great because people like your music, but B, it's like you created a really good party atmosphere where everyone's feeling good and you've done your job as like a DJ to introduce something new. Maybe someone is not Shazamming it, but they're still dancing, and I think that's my goal. As I'd love for people to scream my name like Beyonce, but if you keep dancing and don't tell me to turn it to another song, that's the same amount of praise for me.
Have you ever done one of those like silent DJ gigs where everybody has the wireless headphones and there's a different color corresponding to each DJ?
No.
I did one of those, like I did it for, it was a benefit thing at Toika last spring.
Cool.
And it's fun for sure, but at the same time, it's like kind of demoralizing when no one's listening to your station. Because at one point I was playing like stuff that I wanted to hear, right? Which is always like a bad case when you're working with the masses.
Right.
And I think I was playing like a lot of like sort of rare groove, like a lot of funk and soul. And no one was listening to it. So I found that like the minute I switched it over to, like just mainstream hip hop R&B, then people like got onto it, and it's like, I feel like this is, I don't know, it's like it's more representative, as you said, like nobody has any patience anymore at a club or a bar.
Well, I think this is an interesting thing too, where there's always a constant argument between different generations within the same field. I think the role of the DJ has to evolve with the DJ. It's like him or herself. If I just go and play exactly what I want, I know that I may get like a couple people, but for the most part, people are going to be like, yo, I just want to dance. So you kind of have to gateway drug them again. And like you said, if you just bring them into your realm and start to introduce things. That's at least my approach, and I know I've learned that from other people, and just from listening to other great DJs. It's a great way to do things. I don't have the cachet of a big name where, you know, someone like Killtron, who you go to see their set. Like if you listen to his Boiler Room set, he is playing incredible music, and they're right there with him. You can kind of hear a little bit of the crowd on some like the live takes of it, and stuff that people haven't heard. And he also slides in his own music, and that's a beautiful thing to see someone that has that sort of name that can really bring about a cool set. But not everyone can do that, especially myself. So, you know, saying like, okay, well, if we're going to go trap them, we're going to go through this trap, but then I'm going to bring you into this other realm. And if you do it in an artful way, hopefully they'll come with you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. True masters can really do it easily, but then that's something there's always something to work towards. I'm not there, so you just keep working. Like I DJ at STK in Yorkville, which is hilarious. It's this like ridiculous steak. It's a very chic steakhouse, sorry. And one of their brands is having a DJ on staff every night. But part of the rule is to be within a very specific format that fits the restaurant's brand. You're there to suit their purpose. The nice thing is once you sort of build into the night, my thing has been I'll push, and not in a ridiculous way, but yeah, you can start pushing the boundaries of that brand. And at one point I was like playing an hour's worth of only Craig David, and like no one was upset about it. They're like, nice. Wow, this is really smooth. I'm like, I know. It's Craig David for 65 minutes. But I think that's kind of the interesting
thing. Does Craig
thing.
David have that much material?
Oh, he does. He does.
I only know the one album. I know that he's kind of made like a resurgence in recent years.
Oh my gosh, we could go into a whole litany of Craig David stories. He's actually going to be here in a month.
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's been my
Velvet Underground.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of the beauty of it, and being a musician is always that once you get people, it's really exciting. But you can always see that if like someone doesn't quite get it, it does kind of twinge something in you. And then that's your personal quest, is to like kind of get them on board, and it keeps you busy in the job and busy mentally. And I think the same thing works with creating music. Is inherently I do know I'm not going to win everyone over with what I do, but you put your best foot forward to do so. And at a certain point, you can also have the confidence to say, I don't care if you don't like it. I'm going to cater to these people that do. And that's a really nice kind of natural progression of, I guess, artistic development, I suppose.
Let's backtrack a little bit and just talk about your walk with music, just as a listener, as a fan. Sort of in your early years, when you were a kid, when you first started getting into music, what were you listening to? What was being played around the house?
I was really lucky. My parents were really good about having music playing all the time. So half the time I don't think I was really aware of what was going on. My dad was really eclectic, and my mom loved girl groups, Motown, 1950s and 60s, doo-wop era stuff. So that was always playing. I hated it at the time because I just wanted to listen to Sharon Lowe's and Bram, who were like the pinnacle of cool at the time. But then my dad, as I got older, we were a Columbia House family also. So we got those 10 CDs for a penny. And I would always order what I thought was cool. And I was more influenced by my friends than I think I was by my own taste. But then my dad started ordering CDs for me because he was like, I think you should listen to this. And of course, as a kid, you don't care what your dad likes because you're just like, Coltrane looks old, Dad. But then I remember he had gone to HMV, and I don't remember why, because I just did this whole thing about Columbia House, but he came home with a CD and he's like, you should listen to this. This is going to be really huge. I remember him saying that, and I was like, shut up, Dad. You don't know what's cool. And it was the Fugees. It was a score.
Wow. And
he was like, no, this is really interesting. It's like there's a woman who raps and sings, and it's a group, and they're really interesting, and I was like, whatever. And I started listening to it, and I loved it.
How old were you at the time?
When did the score come out?
It's like 94?
93 or 94?
Yeah, I think Blunted on Reality came in like 93. So I think 95 actually.
Was it 95? Because
Yeah.
I always go by TLC Crazy Sexy Cool because that was 94. So I guess, yeah, it was maybe the next year. He also bought me Crazy Sexy Cool too, ironically, which I loved.
Did he he listen to this himself as well? Or?
Yeah.
Wow.
He had listened
cool
to
dad.
it. Yeah, he was really cool. And he's a high school teacher. So one of his deals was he really wanted to stay in touch with his students. And in doing so, he was much hipper than I was. So that was how I got into like R&B and hip hop. And growing up in Brampton, I listened to a lot of dance hall too, because a lot of my friends were Jamaican or Haitian or from a lot of the West Indies, and even Bhangra too, because a lot of my friends were from like pretty much all over the world except for like just Canada. So I listened to a lot of dance hall and a lot of R&B from WBLK, which was the Buffalo station. It was before Flow, and in Brampton you could get that. So that was playing a lot. I still remember the countdowns, and I'd tape them on cassettes, and I would just replay it. But I think that was the music that really played in the house. The girl group thing, it was more subconscious. Like it was always on when my mom was home, and I just sort of rejected it, but then it became much more influential later. Whereas I think my dad kind of tapped into what was cool, and it was easier for me to be like, oh yeah, because even before that, I didn't really know pop music. I was a late bloomer. I was a classical kid, so I wasn't also very cool. So I had Dance Mix 92, and that was sort of my only cool cassette. And then I got Daydream on cassette, and also New Kids on the Block.
And it's interesting that you had sort of this, I guess, aversion to girl groups and Motown, because you would later on joined the Big Sound, which is like a big Motown dance party night, live Motown covers in Toronto. How did you get involved with that? And can you kind of like think of a sort of your favorite performance that you sang lead vocals for?
Yes. Well, I was asked to be part of the Big Sound as a violinist. They needed someone, so I came in as third violin. And I think I played one show. I also used to sing for the sister show, which was Loving in the Name Of, which was more pop-based, but that was even pretty sporadic, like maybe once or twice. And then I think actually it was Tanika who was sick, or someone was sick, and I had to just sing backups. They needed an extra person. So I did, and I played violin and I sang backup. So I would get up from the violin chair, go sing backup, and then go sit back down and, play whatever. And then, Tanika was sick, so I had to sing her songs because they just needed another girl, and it worked out. And then I never played violin again, and I just stayed on as a singer. My favorite performance was from a few years ago. I had been going back and forth to New York, and I had kind of like the worst heartbreak situation, but I'm not a super public person about that. I keep it pretty quiet, but I was like kind of destroyed and, probably drinking too much and just being insane about it. But I got to sing Aretha Franklin's Ain't No Way, which is this epic ballad about pretty much just not being able to be loved by someone. And that performance, I'll probably never sing like that again, but I was just so sad. And I really feel like that when I opened my eyes after like kind of screaming through the bridge, I've never seen an audience cry. I'd never seen it. It was really shocking. It was very flattering, but I think I was more like kind of aghast at the whole experience because I'd never seen that before. And even though it was like really sad, it was really fulfilling. And you sort of, you need that affirmation after having your heart broken. You need something to come up and say like, it's going to be okay. You can do something else. And that was one of the nicest things that could have ever happened. Like, yeah, something bad happened to you, but you have this and you can use it. And it's really powerful. It was like being Spider-Man with your voice. That's a bad analogy.
I was confused by that. Yeah. What? Spider-Man?
Because, like with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
I should have tied that together earlier. Perhaps that was, yeah. Well, okay. Well, you can keep that in. I don't care. Fine. Spider-Man, Jean-Luc Picard, either one. Whatever.
Actually, that would be pretty cool. Jean-Luc Picard playing Spider-Man.
Oh.
Anyway.
Oh, man.
Well, I know you're like a massive Trekkie.
Yes.
You talk
Here
a lot.
We are.
You talk a lot about it on social media. And there's this one tweet I think that came from like last month where you were, I don't know, at some airport, and for some reason the airport security asked you about.
The Captain Picard doll?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, I'm wondering, I was trying to pick, because there's no picture or whatever, so is this something you just travel with, or did you just buy it wherever you were? Like, I was trying to figure that out.
I don't know why I do this, but years ago, my friend gave me a Captain Picard action figure, and I was so touched by it. And I actually lost touch with that friend. Like, I'm still sort of loosely friends with them, but it was one of the nicest gifts I've ever received. And I just started traveling with him, especially when I go to the States. Like, the States kind of scared me. Just border crossings in general. I think we all can agree it's not like the coolest breeze. Mm-hmm. But I would just bring the Picard doll because I just liked it, and he's awesome. But then it also created this amazing icebreaker because it would go through the scanner and they'd all stare at me like, you're a grown ass woman. Okay. And they'll just talk to you about it. So it became a calming thing, but they always ask, and it like the reaction is always hilarious. And then you end up kind of drawing people out of their like closeted Trekkiness, and they're like, oh yeah, I love that episode. And you're just like, here we are. Stamp the passport and let's continue this conversation.
What's your favorite episode? Or which one comes up most often in an airport security line that people talk about?
They talk about the Borg a hell of a lot. Mm-hmm. I think in general, everyone is like fearful of that.
Yeah.
And the Borg was a very just as a species, they show up a bunch in like all of the reboots of Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I think the Borg in general, everyone talks about the Borg. And then they all talk about, I guess they just talk about like one-liners. Like someone always is like, cool Picard doll, like make it so. And you're like, okay, well, here we are. But it's just like I use the Star Trek thing. This is a bit of a sidebar, but I just think it's funny. When I was dating, I would use it as like a litmus test to see how cool people were. And I remember very specifically, I was someone who I was just like, whoa, you're far too attractive for me to be comfortable around. Like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And you get onto the subject of like, oh, what television shows are you interested in? Like, oh, I really love The Wire because of the writing. It is just extraordinary. What do you like? And you're like, well, I watch a lot of Star Trek. And then I just watched this very handsome man laugh a full belly, wholehearted, joyful chortle at me. And I knew at that moment that I had to leave.
So that's a deal breaker for you.
Oh yeah, if you just straight up laugh at me and think I'm joking.
But what if they're not a Trekkie? Are you cool with that?
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, we can't all understand, the golden age of TV sci-fi.
You can like both Next Gen and The Wire.
You can.
Yeah.
And I do actually like The Wire a lot.
Brilliant.
It
and
is
so is
brilliant.
Star Trek or Next Gen. I'm a Next Gen person, but
have you watched Discovery?
No.
Oh.
It's kind of like a big, like if I start watching it, then there's a whole block of time that's just done, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the way they released it was really interesting is they went back to OG TV where you had to wait a week. And I like this. The binge watching thing is kind of like, it's great, but it takes away sort of the mystique of waiting and the cliffhanger waiting. So they release one episode at a time. Now you can binge watch the whole thing.
Okay. It's all done, I guess.
The first 2 seasons are done.
Yeah.
I highly recommend. Just, it's a good series.
Okay. I'll check it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. And is Picard your favorite Next Gen character?
Yes, by a long shot. He's he's the king of morality, and also just, he's like a thespian actor that took this role of being a sci-fi captain seriously and embodies like all of the greatness that is the Federation of Planets. So he's the perfect person.
Have you ever seen that video of Riker just hopping over chairs? That's like one of my favorite things to watch. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
A backwards hop over a chair. We can watch it afterwards. It's so
it's like
fucking
he doesn't
funny.
ever just go and sit in a chair. It's always like leg over and
here I'll show you. No one can see this.
Live demonstration.
This is where we need video right now.
Yeah.
He does like a sit down, but he does that through the whole series.
I've never really watched a full episode of Next Generation, but I actually know
How
what
much
you're.
time do we have on this podcast?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've seen him do that.
Yeah. Or if you watch Worf just being told no.
Yeah.
It's like 10 minutes. It's like he's asking something and he gets denied. It's fucking awesome. Anyway.
Such a good show. It's just a good show. It's well written, and every episode has conflict, character development. It also deals with a lot of social issues. Oh, that's the other thing. I'm sorry. I told myself before I came here, don't do this.
It's my own fault. I asked about Star Trek.
I was going to bring it up anyways if you didn't. Like, I just can't. And I was told by 2 different people, like, chill on the Star Trek.
So I'm kind of surprised. I mean, maybe you have done this, but like you've never worked in any sort of Star Trek references in your lyrics, right? Or have you?
Let me think. I tried to once, and it got so out of hand. I really did try, and it was too much. It became too literal, where I was like, well, I can't just keep saying like engage every time I get to the chorus. But I think, like that's just kind of like the quirky side thing, where in my head, in sort of like a dream scenario, you get, to do this all the time, and people like yourselves are like kind enough to enjoy your company despite how loony bin it is, and that's what will always happen. It's just like, okay, enough, like album, fine, good job, I guess, but let's discuss this episode.
Because you've sort of worked in very different genres, like I said before, bluegrass to soul to R&B to electro pop, when you're writing a song, is it a conscious decision, I want this to be a soul song, I want this to be an R&B, or does it just sort of happen organically?
When it comes to the record, and now I have at least the forethought to streamline things. And it's not to exclude things, but more, I understand there needs to be a cohesiveness when you create a project. So yes, now there's a conscious effort to write music that sounds a certain way. It doesn't necessarily mean that the lyrics and the melody are written from that perspective. It's more the aesthetic that comes after with the beat or adding instrumentation. But I also write for other artists, and I write strings for other artists, and I do ghostwriting for other people. So in that sense, you do have to sort of tailor your own taste down and really match with someone else. So many times it is conscious, but then one of the nicest things that has happened with writing so much, I can sit down and just write a song, and with such a great production team like Milos on your hand, you can take a song that may not necessarily have that vibe and put it into something that is supposed to be in a cohesive vibe. Because ultimately, a great song can work in any genre.
I know another thing that you recently tweeted was you were in, I think, Manchester, and some drunk girl at a bar told you that S Club 7 is reuniting. And as like a, S Club 7 fan myself, I had to check this out because I'd heard like in the last few years rumors. So it isn't a full reunion. It's going to be S Club 3. I think it's just Joe, Bradley, and Tina that are reuniting.
Oh, no, Rachel?
No, Rachel, who's, most people's favorite S Club 7 member. So, I mean, I was going to ask you, if they asked you to join, to round out the group, and then you could pick 3 other people, 3 of people that you know or artists, well-known artists? Who would those three people be?
Oh, see, this would be really fun because you kind of have to have like a dancer. Let's see, how are we going to round this out then? Well, maybe I would pick Neo because he's such a good dancer and that'd just be fun. Mm-hmm. And he's, like not controversial at all. And I think he would also see the humor in it. Or I would pick Mario.
Okay.
Because I think he would also have a good time. I also just want to be friends with him. Or Omarion, if we're going to go into that. Okay, that's like one possible role. We'll hold auditions and see who gets that one. And another female singer, I guess. I think I'd have a good laugh with probably Meili or Tanika. We'd just probably laugh through that whole thing.
Do you think they'd be down?
Oh, I think they'd... Yes. I think if I didn't tell them, I'd be like, okay, guys, we're going to England, free trip. You just have to learn this choreo. Trust me. I think they'd be down.
I could see Meili doing it just for jokes, and like she would probably turn it into this great, amazing, like artsy sort of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it? I guess you really haven't seen us interact together on stage.
No, I haven't.
A bit of a sight. I won't say it's artistic, but on New Year's Eve, I think the two of us together are like pretty fun. So I think we could embody the, the majesty that is S Club 7. I think we could get it together. I think Tanika would just shake her head, but also have a really good time. Like she could Goldfinger it up mid S Club party. So that'd be good.
In closing, let's end off on Star Trek again.
Yes.
If you could write their theme song,
yeah,
what would that sound like? I mean, what would it be like? I mean, I'm not expecting you to sort of ad-lib it right now, but...
Oh, no. This has been thought about.
Okay, so you have one in mind? If you could freestyle it right now, that'd be amazing. But...
I am going to need to call a few horn players in if we have a little time. No, I think amongst the musician community, the musician Trekkie community, we often like gripe about how awful the Enterprise theme is, which is just ludicrous. I'm sorry, Braxton. I hate it. It sucks. But I think it would have to mirror something in between the original theme, which is just iconic, and the Next Generation theme, because it is like a super cinematic theme where it's like a John Williams, like... The nice thing about being a string player is like you play this music, and in writing for strings you sort of get how that stuff works. Not that I'm a John Williams, I'm not saying that at all, don't quote me on that, but it would have to be like a super cinematic, full horns, like definitely a French horn solo because that's just how things have to go. But yeah, it would have to be quite dramatic and stay away from this like mid-tempo dad rock ballad that ruined Enterprise. But the Discovery theme is quite good. But yeah, I think it would mirror the other great themes of any series that you can remember. Star Wars, the Jurassic Park theme, something that is super iconic like that. I would hope that in, another 40 years of musical training, I could get there.
That would be something.
That would be great. Yeah. I want to hear that.
That would almost bring me to tears.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Maya.
Well, thank you for having me and indulging me.
This is just completely the Star Trek podcast now.
Oh my God, can we do that? Oh, I have time. I'll make time.
You've been listening to episode 33 of This Broken Mixtape featuring singer-songwriter, violinist, and DJ Maya Killtron. If you'd like to hear more, check out thisbrokenmixtape.com to listen to this episode's Spotify playlist and all of our past interviews. Also, if you'd be so kind, share and rate our podcast, which can currently be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Come next week, where our special guests are the juke joint blues duo, Cattle. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it, and come back to check us out again next week.